Hi my dear students. Today we are doing the continuation of Metal and Non-Metal chapter class 10. We have discussed about the chemical properties of metals, that's actually the reaction with oxygen that we have already finished. Now we are going to discuss about the reaction with water, right. So here almost all metals are actually reacting with that oxygen, right, but not all metals are reacting with water, that you have to remember first point, right. So you can understand that almost every metal, right, so which have that some of that reaction, somewhat reaction with oxygen, but not all metals are reacting with water, right. So that we are going to discuss what are the metal and what is their reaction, right. So here you can see that the reaction of metals with water. First we have to understand not all metal do not react with water, that we already told, right. So generally we can say that if metals are reacting with water, right, so when metal react with water, it will form metal oxide and hydrogen, right. So this hydrogen gas will be liberated out, right. So whenever there will be evolution of gas, we will show it as a upper arrow. First chapter we have already learned chemical equation, right. So here you have to understand, if any of the metal, right, if it is reacting with water, then the first step that will form a metal oxide and hydrogen gas will be formed. And this metal oxide further, if it is soluble in water, again I am telling, if the metal oxide is soluble in water, they will go further reaction with water, remaining water molecule, and they will form metal hydroxide. Why I am telling metal oxide if it is soluble? Kyunki, right, so all metal oxide are not soluble in water, right. हर एक metal oxide water में dissolve नहीं होगा, right. So कुछ metal oxides है वो easily water में dissolve होकर it will form metal hydroxide, जैसे कि alkali. हम second chapter में acid and base में हमने learn किया है, there are metal hydroxide which will dissolve in water, right. So that will form that metal oxide which will dissolve in water and they will form metal hydroxide. That bases are called alkalis, right, those who are actually dissolving in water. So that's why especially we are telling not all metal oxide. Those metal oxide which will soluble in water, that will be converted into metal hydroxide. For example, if you are taking the case of sodium and calcium like that, first it will convert, right. So sodium plus water, that will form sodium oxide and hydrogen gas will be liberated. Then later you can see that metal oxide will further react with water to form metal hydroxide. So actually this is a two-step process. We will write it in a single step. You can write like this, metal plus water is equal to metal hydroxide plus hydrogen. That also you can write, there is no wrong. So here I have given an example, right. So here you can see that sodium plus water, right. What first it will form? It will form sodium oxide. Then that sodium oxide which will soluble in water, then it will form sodium hydroxide and hydrogen gas will be liberated, right. So here we can understand that if you are going for that rate of reaction, how easily this metal will react with water, that rate of reaction is actually varying according to the metal, right. So different hai, we have already learned the reactivity series, right. So in this chapter also we are going to discuss that. Actually I have discussed the reactivity series in the first chapter itself, but here in this chapter also we are going to discuss it again in the next session, right. So here reactivity, that means how easily they will produce that reaction, वो vary होती है. हर एक मेटल को अलग अलग है, कुछ बहुत जल्दी मेटल हाइड्रोक्साइड बन जाती है, कुछ बहुत धीरे रिएक्ट करते हैं, तो वो रेट ऑफ द रिएक्शन दैट विल वेरी, राइट. सो रेट ऑफ द रिएक्शन इट विल वेरी अकॉर्डिंग टू द मेटल टू मेटल. सो फर्स्ट वी आर डिस्कसिंग विद द सोडियम एंड पोटेशियम. सोडियम एंड पोटेशियम इट्स एक्चुअली हाईली रिएक्टिव मेटल है. They will react violently with water and they will produce their metal hydroxide and hydrogen gas. Actually this process is highly exothermic. That means exothermic means there will be a lots of heat will be liberated after this reaction. उतना ज़्यादा heat produce करती है, so that much heat is actually enough for catching that hydrogen gas, that fire. So whatever that after the reaction, whatever hydrogen gas is formed, that will be immediately catch fire, and that you can see that whenever the sodium, if you are taking that in laboratory, you can see that if you are taking a sodium piece and you are putting it in water, within fraction of seconds you can see that the sodium will catch fire or the potassium will catch fire. Why? Because these metals will react with water and they will be converted into their corresponding hydroxide and the evolution of gas. Which gas? That hydrogen gas will be there. and there will be that much heat produced, that's actually enough for making this gas burning, catch fire, right? So that's why we are telling, even we don't need any hot water, normal temperature wali water bhi nahi hai. You can take cold water itself. So you can easily understand how much their reactivity is there. So sodium, potassium, if you are taking, it will react with even cold water. That means violent reaction will be there, and that will produce like this, right? So next we are going to the sodium, potassium react violently with cold water. Again, you have to remember cold water I am telling. Water, and the process is highly exothermic, so immediately that will catch the hydrogen gas will catch fire. Next we are moving to that reaction of calcium. What is the rate of reaction of calcium? Calcium will also react with cold water itself, right? But that what will say, hydrogen gas is produced, that heat is producing. This is also exothermic reaction. The heat is producing is not that much sufficient to make the hydrogen gas burn, right? तो हीट प्रोड्यूस हो रही है, ये भी एक्सोथर्मिक ही है, बट उतना हीट नहीं है जितना सोडियम और पोटेशियम के साथ प्रोड्यूस किया है. So what will happen, that heat, right? So this gas will be in the form of, this gas immediately will be converted in the form of bubbles. तो ये गैस है ना, ये कैल्शियम की एक पीस है, इसके ऊपर बबल जैसा, you can see that the hydrogen gas will form bubbles in that and stick into that calcium, that metal, जो remaining calcium है, right? बाकी तो burn हो रही है, right? So what, sorry, convert हो रही है calcium hydroxide में, and the remaining calcium metal के ऊपर ये stick करेगा, right? So you can see that hydrogen gas produced will be stick onto the calcium, remaining calcium, and you can see that the calcium will start floating in water, right? It's very beautiful to see that. Maybe if you are getting, I will put a link of this video, how that calcium is getting fire and all below my description box. You can go and check that so that you will get a visual treat also, right? So here you can see that if this is the water, whenever a calcium piece, if you are putting in cold water itself, what will happen, that will be converted into calcium hydroxide and there will be a liberation of hydrogen gas. Obviously, hydrogen gas will be evolved here, right? So what will happen, there is also exothermic, heat produced will be there, right? So the heat production, that heat will be making that hydrogen gas as a bubbles, right? And that bubbles will stick onto that calcium and it will start floating on the water surface. So you can see that speedily moving calcium, that you can see here, right? Now we are moving to that magnesium, right? Magnesium, there is no reaction with cold water. Again, I told that sodium and potassium, that will react with cold water. Calcium also react with cold water. But what is the difference? Here, this will violently react and produce that, that hydrogen gas produced, that will catch fire. But here, not that much heat is producing in the case of calcium, and that's why that bubbles of hydrogen gas will stick onto that and it will start floating, right? Now what about magnesium? Magnesium will not react with cold water, it will react with hot water, right? And there also you can see that hydrogen gas, whatever it is, will be there, and that hydrogen gas will stick onto that magnesium and it will also start floating. But what we have taken, we have taken the cold water, it's not cold water, it's the hot water we have taken, right? So in the case of calcium, we have taken cold water, in the case of magnesium, we have taken hot water, then they start floating, right? Now in the next other metals, some of the metals we are taking, right? Aluminium, iron and zinc. There is no reaction with cold water and hot water, right? So that means you can see that what is the difference is cold water, hot water and steam. You can see that their reactivity actually decreases, right? So that's why they need some more water, that means more reactive. So that's why we have taken even cold water itself, they are reactive. That means they are highly reactive. It need hot water, not that much, right? So that's why we have taken hot water. Now what about that aluminium, iron and zinc? In that case, cold water, hot water, there is no reaction. But these metals can react with steam and they can produce that liberation of metal oxides will be there and liberation of hydrogen gas will be there. Example, you can see that Al, aluminium, right, water, Al2O3, aluminium oxide plus liberation of hydrogen gas. And here there is no catching fire, nothing, because steams, it's less reactive, right? What about the other metals? So other metals like Pb, lead, copper, gold, Au and silver, Ag. These metals are actually, we can say that there is no reaction at all, right? So water के साथ कोई reaction नहीं है. आपको भी पता है these gold, silver that we are using for making jewelry and all. Why? If they are having any reaction with water, obviously you cannot use it as a general purpose, right? So उसके साथ बिल्कुल भी reaction नहीं है. ये these are actually least reactive है. So that's why we can make jewelries and all from this. So as a summary, what we have discussed about different metals and how their reaction, right? So what is their reactivity rate, कितना है वो हमने discuss किया. तो मैं summarize कर रही हूँ वापस. You can understand that sodium potassium highly reactive है, highly reactive metal है. तो वो water के साथ, कौन सी water? Cold water के साथ ही react करेगा. And there will be a violent reaction. And after this, what will be there? Their metal hydroxide, hydrogen gas, and a lots of amount of heat. That much heat is enough for that, making that hydrogen gas burn, catch fire, right? So that means immediately you can see that fire on the water surface, right? When sodium and potassium reacts. Now calcium also react with cold water, but there is not that much heat, sufficient heat is there in the case of sodium and potassium. So what will happen? The hydrogen bubbles formation will be there. That bubble will stick onto the calcium and it will start floating on the water surface, right? In the case of magnesium, not with cold water, it will react with hot water, right? And again the same like that, the hydrogen gas will be forming the bubbles and it will stick onto the magnesium. It will also start floating on the water surface, but it is hot water surface, right? What about that aluminium, iron and zinc? These all are having same reaction. They don't have any reaction, doesn't have any reaction with cold water or hot water. They will react with steam, right? Obviously there will be metal oxide and you can see that hydrogen gas will be liberated. And lead, copper, gold and silver like that metals will not react with water. They will not have any reaction with water. So that's why we are considered as least reactive. I hope you understand what is the reaction with that metal with water, right? I already told you this one you have to remember. Normally metal first step mein it will react with water, it will form metal oxide and hydrogen gas, and those metal oxide which will be soluble in water further react and will produce metal hydroxide. I hope it is clear.